Welcome to Code Mania. Learn more, express more.
This video is about how to use select options tag in Visualforce page along with select list. This select options tag can be used with select checkboxes, select radio, select list. This video will have the demonstration of using this select option along with select list. On the next example, you will see how the select options has been used with number of variations or number of applications along with select list. Now going to the next slide, here is some example where we implemented the select options and demonstrated by number of examples. Here first example where we have implemented this select option and along with select list, where you can select only one option and can be displayed in a particular page or particular portion part, holding that value, the selected value, in a variable. Now going to the next example where you can change the color of the currently selected value using CSS option, and this selected value has been stored in a variable, and using that variable value you can change the color of the particular text or particular selected value. Here see number of examples where the selected color is displayed in a text for that particular color. Going to the another example where we have retrieved all the selected roles, all the roles in the current organization, and stored or displayed using this select option tag. For example, if I show you that what are the current roles available for the organization, we will see that the values which are being shown into this select options also present into the role hierarchy that current organization. See, these are the roles are available here: CEO, CFO, all these. Also the current organization having role is also present here. You can see using select option tag we can display the current roles or any data of the organization in a picklist format. Now going for the next example where we can create the dependent picklist using this select option and rendering attribute for a particular Visualforce Apex tag. Here is the example where we have created the dependent picklist in a new look and feel way, where the records present in this object will be shown based on the category. The records which will be displayed in the Visualforce page in a select option will have the dependency on this category. So this way we have created the application or created the flow in the Visualforce page. See, the categories has been selected here, and based on this category the records are displayed in this select option tag, and using select list we are selecting the values. Now going for next example where we have created the dependent picklist and the dependent picklist and the controller picklist. Dependent picklist will have the disabled option, where if you select any value from the controlling picklist, then the dependent picklist will be enabled. Here see, if you click on the none, the selected value is disabled, and if you click any particular category, then and only this picklist or dependent pick list is displayed. Now going for another example where you can select any value from the dependent pick list and any details will be displayed. Here is third level of dependency where you have created the dependent page block using this select option. So first level, if you click on the none, then all will be second dependent pick list will be disabled and that page block will be gone. If you click any values first, the select item will be enabled, and if you click any values from the selected item, then the page block will be displayed. If you click on the none from the dependent pick list, the page block will be gone. So this is how we created the application. Going for the another example where you have implemented number of colors in a select option, and if we click on the select any color and click on the change theme button, the Salesforce theme will be changed. So here this is the account creation page where you can create the account from this page. This is also Visualforce page, and you can change the theme. You can change the theme of the Salesforce using this select option as well, and also for using the coding as well. So the next slide would be how we have implemented these application using coding, using select options. Will be demonstrating those. Now going with first example where we are going to implement one select option where some values will be displayed in a Visualforce page, and one select option will be selected, and the selected value will be stored in a particular variable. Here first apex form, then bringing select option with select list. So select option always will be the child of select list, where select options will hold the values provided from the database or hard coded into the apex controller, and select list will select the single value from the select option. So here we are going to implement the select options and providing the values. Values always must be in a variable format or formula format. To display any variable in the apex page, this kind of notification, this kind of convention will need to be used. First second bracket, then exclamatory sign, and then the variable name. Here the variable name is selected color, and the variable name for the select option is LST color. Always will have to remember that there will be no space for a particular variable. So here the variable has not yet been declared into the controller, so we'll have to create the controller first, which is nothing but the apex class. Now creating the apex class and the constructor for the apex class. So this apex class should have the constructor defined. Here we are defining the constructor. This is the constructor with the class name, that means the method. So constant apex controller has been defined here, and we are defining the variable, initializing the variable, which is a string format. So select list will select the value and will store in this string variable. Here is the getter setter method. Getter setter method is used to get any value from the Visualforce page and to set any value into this Visualforce page for a particular variable. Now defining the variable for the list of options. As I told you before, the variable which will be fetching the value or will store the value for a particular select options will be type of list of select options. Select option actually, not options. Visualforce page will have the select options, that means number of select option present, and the apex class will have the select option. So first allocating memory in the constructor, that means when the page will be loaded, this selected color will have this value, and the select option, which will have nothing in it, but will assign value in later. Oh, it's just bracket problem. So our example has been implemented considering all the possible errors to implement this select option. Here invalid constructor, oh, it's just typo mistake. Well, the select option have been implemented here, which having no value assigned to it. So first, when constructor will be loaded, the select option will have some value, that is none. Now how we add any value into the select option? This select option variable dot add bracket new select option, and then first value and the label. That means this is something need to be concentrated. It's like first it will hold the value and then it will hold the label. That means Visualforce page will display this label, but when you select any value from the select option, in backend the value defined present into this constructor will have this value, that is null. So the variable that selected color will have null value. So this has been added into the Visualforce page, which having none label and nothing is selected, that means null. Now we are assigning number of colors. There is red, green, all this. So at last you can see that this will have the letters label, but when any value will be selected, this ABC value will be stored into the variable. Okay, it's again typo. Well, now you can see if we select, these values are available into the select list, but it's having, we need to assign define one parameter here, size. So if we click on size, it will be 1. See, there are, if we click on 2, this is how it will be displayed. Now If we click on the multi-select is equal to true, the select list will be like multi-select. We can select multiple of values using this select option, but this video will not be for this multi-select, only one select, and it would be like pick list. And if we don't assign any value for the multi-select attribute, it will automatically be false. That means the value which will be displayed in a select list will be single list. Now we are going to display this selected color. That means for any selected color from the select options, we will hold the value into a variable and will display in a page block. But for this, we need to use some special tag, apex tag here. Now it's just simple. We are putting this variable in a page and saving it, and if we change the value, nothing is displayed yet until or unless we are re-rendering this page calling one method. See, the value is displayed, the variable is displayed in the page, but if we change the value from the select option, nothing is displayed, nothing is changed. So for this, what we'll have to do, so this select option holding these values but still not displaying. So for this, we just need to modify few things here. We need to use apex action support tag, which will call the event, which will re-render the page using this event attribute. It's kind of Ajax call. On change, it will re-render the page block section and using the ID. So first we need to define the ID for this page block section. So re-render this page block section and calling this dummy method. We need to define one page reference method here, which will return nothing but will re-render the particular section. So the action would be this calling method. So on change of this value from this select list, it will re-render this page block section calling this method. So if we select any value here, the variable is displayed. Now if we change the value, as I told you, that the label and the value. So if we select on the letter, it will display the value here. So this is how we designed this page. We have implemented the select list in a page, and we have holded the selected value from that selected option into a variable, and on change of the value of this select options, the page has been displayed. See, okay, here is the code. If you want to implement in your own organization, please implement. Now going for the next slide, what we are going to implement, we are just going to display the selected value from the selected option, and will change the color according to the selection. Here we are just going to add one apex tag, that is apex output level, and we'll include this variable in between this apex level tag, and we'll include the style will have the color as selected color value. So once this page block section will be re-rendered, this apex color will hold the value and will change the variable color which will be displayed into the page according to that CSS definition, style definition. So just one level with few CSS styling options. Now I am implementing using this one column option in a two columns option into the page block section, which is by default defined in for Salesforce. Next we'll include this into column 1, and here is font size and font weight. Now saving this. It's quite large actually. Well, we'll check later. See, this selected color has been displayed green yellow. Okay, changing the size. Okay, now it looks okay. Yeah, great. Now if we change the color, it will be green yellow accordingly. If we change it to magenta will also be displayed. Now changing the column number to 1 so that it will be displayed in a proper format. Well, if we select on green yellow, it will be green yellow, and if it's later, as I told you that selected color will have no value, so color is by default black for later. Now here is the code. If you want, you can implement it in your own organization. Thank you. Now going for the next slide, next example, which is about the fetching organization role and displaying in a select option or displaying in a pick list. So you can fetch the organization roles and display into the pick list. Here how we implement this, we are implementing into a page block using this select list, where you can select a particular role and you can store it into a variable, and you can use the variable for future purpose as well. So select options, which will have one value which would be obviously select option type, and the selected role, which will be string type. Now the value is for this particular select option as role lst, which will hold all the organization role records or values, and the selected role will hold the value the selected role from the pick list into the Visualforce page in a string format. Now we are going to define the selected role variable using this getter setter method, and the role lst in a select option format. As I told you, the variable type should be list of select option. And this is the getter setter method. Then we are going to fetch all the organization role or user role data, all the data from the user role object, and will store in a temporary variable which having type as list of user role. So list of user role will hold all the records fetched from this organization, fetched from this user role object, that is id, name, developer name, all this. Okay, now we are going to run a for loop to convert this user role type to select option. How? So we are creating an object role obj, and for this temp variable which is holding currently all the role records with properties as id, name in it, will change, will this role lst, which is a type of select option, will add new select option for the id and the name of the current role here. So role obj.id and role obj.name. So for a particular name, selected name, role id will be selected and will be stored into this selected role variable. So for each and every record in temp object, this role lst will be stored. Role lst will store the value of role id and role name. Now we are going to save the page. See what error. Okay, it's just typo. Again, See, all the roles have been imported from the user role object. Now we are going to change the size of the select list to 1 so that it will be in a pick list format. See, the roles are being displayed in a pick list. Now what we are going to do, we are going to fetch the role ID for the particular selected role from the pick list, that means selected option. For that we are going to use Apex action support as before, and we are going to re-render one page block where this selected variable, that means selected role, will be displayed, so that for a particular change of any role from the pick list, selected role variable value will also be changed. So we are just going to re-render one page block. Now going to create one page block, and going to add Apex output text in a Apex page block section. And going to place that selected role variable in between this Apex output text, and going to provide Apex page block ID, so that whenever this pick list value is changed, it will call the action dummy method and will re-render this page block 1. Now going to create the dummy method here, which will return nothing. Okay, again typo mistake. Let's see if our implementation is correct or not. See, yes, it has been implemented. The IDs are being changed accordingly. So if we select the ID for a particular role and verify that if this ID is valid for a valid role for that organization or not, we can be sure that our implementation is okay. So we are going to paste that ID into the address bar, and we'll see that the role which is being displayed into that tab is correct for the selected role or not. It's director channel sales, and here is the ID for the director channel sales. If we paste the ID into the address bar, we can find that this is for director channel sales. Okay, so here is the Visualforce page code, and here is the Apex page code. If you want, you can implement into your own organization to fetch the roles and store into this variable. Now our next example is about to create the dependent pick list by fetching records of an object. Here we have created one object, and this is one field for that object. Now the fields having 4 values. Based on these values, we will create one Visualforce page, and we'll get these records in a pick list, and we'll create the dependent pick list based on the category, this category. Okay, let's create the page. Here is we need to add the form, then the apex page block, and first we will create the standard controller to fetch the records for that from that object, and also we need to use one custom controller. Using this extension we can add custom controller as along with the standard controller, and based on this input field, which is a pick list field, that category will create dependent pick list using the select option. That means if we create the field, if we select any values, any category from that input field, the select list option, the select option, which is the dependent pick list for on this pick list, on this field, will get the records. So this custom controller has been created, and this is the pick list field. Here pick list field in a apex page block and in a apex page block section, so for better look and feel. Now the pick list field has been placed into the Visualforce page, and we are going to create one variable of string format, that is selected category, and the getter setter method. Now the getter variable will have null value when constructor is loaded. Now one action support to call a method based on the changing value of this input field. So once value will be changed from this input field, the variable will hold the value and one method will be called. By calling this method, we'll pass the value stored, we will pass the value which will be selected into this variable selected category. So creating the method, now this variable is equal to this input field selected value. Now we are calling this input field by directly using the standard controller, that is the object name, but we need to define one variable for that object. That means we need to create one variable for this object, which will, using that variable, will call the input field and will place the same into the Visualforce page. So we are just going to create the input field. As you see that assignment from schema object to string is not applicable here, so we are going to create one variable, that is records, and we are going to call using this record into the this way. Now see, using list it is not acceptable because if you use list, you cannot call or you cannot fetch any field, you cannot place any field into the Visualforce page, because list will store number of records, number of definition. But for that you will have to use directly object. So first we are trying to use list so that you can find what are the errors might come, what are the variations might be possible. So here we are defining list first. So here we have received the error like field expression must be concrete to S object. So we have placed the field and the expression is list, so that is not acceptable. So we are placing the S object type here. S object means schema object. So we have created one variable for this object, and now the field is available here. So using that S object variable, we have placed the field into the page. So once we click on the once we change the value for this picklist field, it will call the action support method this, and will this variable, string variable, that selected cat will store the value from this category field, the value which will be selected. Now we are going to place another SelectList option which will have the dependency on the previously placed select option, which is input field, I mean the picklist field. So for that we are going to add one apex select list in this page, and the select option. I hope you are totally familiar with select option and select list now, so it would not be any problem for that. Now we are going to add value, that is one variable which will be defined into the custom controller, and this is another value which is string type. That means if you change the value from the select option and select one particular value, the selected item will hold the value. Now we are going to define that selected item variable into the custom controller. So this way, getter and setter method, as I told you before, that getter and setter method need to be defined for each and every variable. So these are two methods where Salesforce had defined its own standard to make it very ease of access, very quick to use, actually using get set. Each and every variable should have the getter and setter method if that variable is referenced to Visualforce page, and if you are getting any value from that variable, or you are setting any value. So here we have set the getter setter method for those two variables, where list of select option for the record options, which is the dependent pick list for the controller field, this record options. Now we'll have to define the constructor value. That means when the select option will be loaded at the beginning, then what value it will be have, that is defined by the constructor, as I told you before. So this is the value we are assigning for that variable record options in the at the constructor. Now we are going to add some values. The value could be null or anything. So for select option, the value should be null, but the label should be none. You can see the previous examples for that. So at the beginning the label should be none, but the value should be null for the selected item. Now we are saving the modification. See, we have one error here. Line breaks not allowed in string literal. Well, okay, that was typo mistake. We'll see, when page is loaded, the value is selected as none. Now we are going to fetch the records according to the selected category using this picklist field. In that case, we are going to put that output label and select list in a page block section. And the column should be 1, and as I described before, the multi-select option is always false if you don't define anything. Now we are going to use ID attribute, as we have defined ID as PBS2, and we are going to use that ID into the Apex action support. Now at the constructor and at the method, actually the method which will be called using that action support, we are going to fetch the records based on the category which is selected using that input field. So if you select any value, that means if you select any value from that pick list, the record option should be null first, although it have some values. So we have defined record options is equal to new list of select options. And now we are going to fetch the records from that object based on the category selected. So initializing the variable temp val of the type list of the object and defining the query. So this is how we can fetch the value and stored into the variable based on the query, where these fields value for the records will be stored into this variable. Now we are going to perform some conditional operation where this size should be greater than 0. If it is not greater than 0, then the action defined between these conditions will not execute, and the options selected here should be remaining. So we are going to add the temp val record details, that is ID and the names, into the select option and will be displayed into the field, into the Visualforce page, that is selected option. Now this action support, there is an error that which will be removed by action support. So this action support will be called if the on change operation is executed based on this input field value change. So we have received the details. So we have received, or we are able to display the selected option for the records from the object based on the category. Here changing the size, so now we can have the record details, and it is totally dependent on the category field. See, these are the records based on this category. In previous example we have created the dependent pick list, but now we'll create the application which will display the value based on the selected category, but the pick list will be in hide condition if we don't select any value from the category. So in that case we'll have to use the render operation. Here we are defining one variable as flag, which is boolean in type, and we are assigning the flag for this apex tag. So as you see, this flag is not available here, so we need to define the flag variable here. So public boolean and the flag name, that means the variable name, which is type is boolean. Now get a set method and the constructor definition, that means what will be the status of this flag when the page will be loaded. So it will be loaded as none, as at the beginning the category value should be none. So as you see, the value is, the select option is not available, I mean all the things. So constructor is loaded with false. Now we are going to assigning the variable flag age is equal to true if any record is selected. So if any record is available, the flag would be true. If I explain what is happening when any value is selected, I mean the temp value is greater than 0, then record that flag is true. Now what we are going to do, if any no record is selected, that means this flag would be false. Now if you select any values and we change it, it will be none. Now if you select bird again, if you select none, this value will be gone because no value is selected and this flag is false. Now if you select bird and select any value from there, and if you click none again, and if you click bird, this value remains. So this is one of the problem. This should be none first. So in that case, what we'll have to do, we are going to place this null value assignment into this option. That means when any records available, first thing would be the select option should be null. That means none, and the selected value also should be none. Now for the variation, if you place the same at the end, what will happen? The same thing remains. That means nothing is displayed. Now what we are going to do, we are going to place the same on the above of if operation. That means if nothing is selected, that means if no record is available for the selected category, that is none, this selected cat is equal to none, and the record initiation would be null. So see, the first none is selected. Now if you click on bear and again click on none, that is gone. Now if you click on animal, the bear is selected. That is another problem. So that things need to be removed. Okay, so we are selecting the selected cat option, and we are placing in front of in between if condition. Let's see what happens. We select any option here from selected field, and we change to none again, and it is gone. Again select fish, and the value is still remains. So there is some problem, I think, in the controller. So what is the problem we are going to find? You're going to see that this action support is okay, it's calling on method. Well, as I see, the problem is that selected items, that second option should be null when we select any value from the selected cat. Now we save it. Now I believe it will be working fine. So if you click on animal and select bear and click on none again and click on animal, it will be none. So the situation is that when any value is selected using based on the category from the category field, it will have any value into the temp val, and all these variable will be executed based on the requirement. The next example is about to make that field disabled or enabled, not hidden or showing. So in that case, what we are going to do, we are going to replace that rendering option with disable. Here, making the select list as disabled or enabled based on the flag activity. We are using disabled attribute and the flag variable. So in the constructor, the flag will be true as no value is selected, so the dependent pick list will be true. That means the flag will be true and disable will be true. And if any value selected based on the category, the flag will be false. So we are defining flag H as true, and if temp val size is greater than 0, the flag will be false, and if temp val value is not greater than 0, the flag will be false. Flag will be true, sorry. So as you see, the category is true. That means the dependent pick list disabled, and if any value is selected, the field is enabled. That means the disable option is false. So anything we select here, the variations are coming. All the logics are same as before, just changing the flag option. So based on this tutorial, you can learn how to use rendering option and the disable attribute for the select list. Here is the variations you can see. So when you select any value from that, the temp val size is greater than 0 and the flag H is false. That means disable is false. Now if you select none, the flag is true. That means disable is true here. And when the page is loaded, the flag is initiated as true. That means disable is enabled. This example is about to create the page where dependent pick list will display the record details with number of parameters. So we are going to create the section with page block, and the page block section which will have the details of the selected record based on the category. So here we are going to implement 3 output fields with the values based on the selected item from that selected list. Here we are going to use the title as details, record details, and selected ID as PBS 3 for that page block section, and the record details ID as PB1, sorry. Now rendered page, this page block section will have the particular variable of type boolean. Now we are going to define that boolean variable as flag HP. And at the constructor we are going to assign some value into that flag variable. That means flag HP. This is just the variation. If flag HP is equal to true, what happens? Now we are going to use that flag HP into this rendered option. Now going to add one variable of type subject, where which will hold the value details of the records fetched based on the selected item. So the variable of type sublist object, that is SList, and the getSetter method as always. And the constructor variable when the constructor will be loaded, constructor value of the variable at the constructor actually. Now one another method which will fetch the record details based on the selected record by category. So when we select the record using the dependent pick list, the ID is selected. Now this method will fetch the record details using that ID. But before that, when the record details will be fetched, this flag HP need to be false. That means when any value will be selected, when no value will be selected, this flag HP will have to be false. Or from any other conditions, this flag HP will be false when this method will be called. And the record details will be null. Now for the selected item not is equal to null, this action will be called in the if condition. First flag HP will be true, and the record, this variable will get the details of the records based on the selected item. Here, based on the selected item, all the ID, name and category is fetched from the database for this object. Now we're going to add try and catch method, so that if no record is selected using the dependent pick list, it will have the catch of the exception. Now we're going to use that variable and the ID field and the name and the category, and we save it. Now as you can see, if we select, oh, there is an error. Okay, it's typo mistake. This bracket should be not here, there. Now if you click on the normal and click on the item, nothing is displayed yet. Now you are going to add one action support, which will call the method based on the selected category and the selected item. Selected category will fetch the record from the select using that selected cat option variable, and this action support will fetch the record details based on the selected item, both having event as on change, and will re-render the page block. So we are going to define the action attribute, which will call this method based on the event, this record details method, which I have defined into the controller. Now we save it. Now if you click on the fish, it will have the details of the records with attributes of fish. Now you can see that nothing is displaying here. So the problem is that this rendered was not defined in a particular formulary format. The expression should be in formula format. Now if we save it, it should be like the record details is displayed at the beginning, as we have defined flag HP as true, and it is being re-rendered and all the details are being shown. But if we click on the none button, none option in this category list, that record details is not gone, it is still being displayed. So this is not the good practice. We are defining flag HP as false. Now if you click on the fish and a particular item, the record details is displayed, but if you click on the none, the page is not gone, the page block is not gone. But if we click on the category and select any category, and if you click on the none, the record details still not gone, which holding some values. So this need to be changed. How are we going to change that one? We need to call the method which will fetch the record details in the action support for this change of category. So when category will be changed, this record details will be called, and the for the value which has been defined yet will be set to false, and we need to add the re-render option as well based on the action support defined to the category change pick list. field. So if we select on the pick list field for a particular option, as we can see that these two page blocks are being re-rendered. Now what need to be done, as we are removing this one first. I don't think that that will help us in any way. Now we are selecting any value. If you click on the none, that is also gone, but this record details page block is still not gone. So some changes need to be done here. So it should be exception catch. So as I see that here, if you select the none, the exception occurs, null pointer exception. That means this S list holds no values based on the selected none. So it will catch the exception and will set the value as false of the flag HP. We save it. Now if we select any category and any fields and click on the none, it is gone. Select on a value, and based on this value, if we paste that ID and verify with this name, we can see that that name is totally selected. So what is happening, we are just setting the column as 1 so that it is displayed in a proper format. Select any value, it is displaying all the details. So click on the ID and display and match with that same, we can see that it is properly displayed. So please see the description and the details of this video. If you like this video, please like it by clicking on the button and keep subscribing this channel, and it will help to grow our subscriber. Thank you.